I'm feeling pretty submissive and breedable today. Hey everyone, and welcome to the submissive and breedable tier list. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm going crazy. For the last 3 weeks, I've been trying to get this tier list done, and I just can't. It is such a hard tier list to do, because I have no idea where to put anyone. Originally, I had this tier list, and then I was like, man, this doesn't feel very good. So I posted it on a YouTube community tab, and it was a mess. No one could agree. I don't like this tier list, and so I moved it into a political compass right here. So I guess it won't be a tier list. I mean, I'll show you the tier list at the end of the video, but this is technically a political compass list video. I mean, I'm still gonna call it the tier list because that just sounds nicer. But this video has been the single hardest tier list I have done, and it's probably going to be the most inaccurate, so I'm very sorry about that. But what counts as submissive and breedable? Like, if you understand the term submissive and breedable, you'll probably have a basic understanding, right? But it's more of subjective. Like, once you start actually trying to rank them, people will start arguing, and you have to define what submissive and breedable means. And that's where it gets weird and why this has been such a difficult tier list. So I'm just gonna start doing stuff, and if it's wildly inaccurate, we're just gonna have to live with that. Because I sure can. I don't want to ever come back to this tier list. There's a reason my last video was something like Lifeweaver gripped me. I'm losing it. Anyways, let's start with Ashe. So we're already in a weird dilemma where Ashe is dominant and quote-unquote submissive at the same time. She is dominant over her butler Bob and her gang that she runs. However, I think some of you out there will already instinctively know how she is submissive. I'm not explaining that. There's also some assumptions being made. So again, it's you see how weird this tier list is? It's just hard. So going off of the Overwatch lore, she would be on the more dominant side as she is a leader of a gang and she has complete control over her butler Bob. However, we have to decide, is she breedable or not breedable? I can't. This is too ridiculous. So Ashe is 39 years old, so I'm gonna put her like just a little bit into breedable, I guess, because I don't know what age is not breedable. We also don't have evidence of her breedability. I'm losing it. This is ridiculous. Why did you make me do this? Anyways, I think this is a pretty good place for her because she's dominant over her gang. And she's not that breedable, but she's also not breedable, and we're gonna move on. I never have to listen to this after I edit this video, so I don't care anymore. Next up is Ana. Now, a weird thing about Ana is that she has had a child, so we know she is quote-unquote breedable. However, she's 60 years old now, so I don't know if we're talking about current Ana, where she'd be like over here, or past Ana, or like in total, where she'd be like right over here. I feel like I'm gonna put her on her actual age right now and put her like somewhere over here. Simply because I got some comments saying like, Ana is not breedable, she's like 60, so I'm gonna put her on the not breedable side. Although she has had a child, so we know that in the past she was over here. With that being said, is she dominant or submissive? Ana has been in positions of power like being second in command in Overwatch, I'm pretty sure. However, that is not in command, that is technically submissive to the person that is in command. Which is a weird way of looking at that, but honestly a lot of these people are in dominant positions, so I have to kind of make it relative in a way. So I'm going to put her in not breedable about here, and I'm going to put her a little bit into submissive, but not too far. She does show a lot of dominant characteristics, but there's going to be a lot of dominant characters, so just trust me on this placement. Next up is Baptiste, and oh boy, I don't know where to put this man. So Baptiste is 36, so I think it would make sense that he'd be about here on the breedable scale. However, we have also learned that Baptiste and Lifeweaver are kind of a thing. So, I hate to be that guy who says it, but when two males try to reproduce, nothing really happens? So technically, he would be more over here because whatever. But at the same time, he's over here because he just would be. You see how hard it is to not get demonetized while talking about being submissive and breedable? So again, this is one of those scenarios where I'm not sure whether to put him over here or over here. I think for the fun of it, I'm gonna put him over here. Although if you're keeping track, he would technically be here. But since since we're shipping Lifeweaver with Baptiste, he's gonna be over here. Now the question is he a top or bottom? And I will not say that for the rest of the video. I really don't know which one to put in dominant and which one to put in submissive. Alright, so I hate... Oh god. Alright, here's the deal. Lifeweaver has an ability called Life Grip, where he forcefully moves you towards him. That seems pretty dominant. I know I didn't really talk much about Lifeweaver already, and I'm going out of order already, but it's really good to put these two together, as they are kind of partners. It's pretty official that they're dating because of the Twitter post from a while ago. So if Lifeweaver is dominant, Baptiste would be submissive. Next up is Bastion. Unfortunately, Omnics I do not think can breed in the Overwatch universe, so they'll be on the not breedable side. However, is Bastion dominant or submissive? Again, we can take this two ways. You see how hard this video is now? So it could be dominant because he has a giant machine gun. That's pretty dominant. But then also, he listens to Torbjorn, so that's kind of submissive. He does what Torbjorn says. He did what the Omnic people leader said, like Ramattra. So I'm not really sure whether to put him in submissive or dominant, because I'm pretty sure he will dominate you by shooting you. But at the same time, he listens to other people. So I actually think I'm gonna put him in submissive, but not breedable, and he's gonna be under Baptiste, just because he always listens to his masters on what to do, and that's pretty submissive to me. Next up is Brigitte. Brigitte is 23, so I'm gonna be that guy who says, whoop, she is pretty breedable. Vaporeon would be happy. That is probably the weirdest way I could have said that. Anyways, is she dominant or submissive? And I'm gonna put her in submissive, actually. This is because she listens to Reinhardt. She is under him, she is his squire, so she is not in charge, she's not the dominant one. She listens to Reinhardt and her dad probably about as much as Bastion, so I'm gonna put them like around the same level, because I think that's about accurate. Next up is Cassidy. Cassidy's a little bit in this weird spot where he is number 137, so I'm gonna put him about here on the breedable scale, so just like a tiny bit over more than Ashe. But I mean, he's submissive to listening to Overwatch. He has that cactus clip with Sombra, which is kinda weird.
Cactus spines in butt. How get rid of?
Kind of leaning towards submissive, I'm gonna be honest with you. However, with his relationship with Ashe, I don't know which one's the dominant one, which is a weird thing to say. It's kind of the same thing as these two. So in a way, I actually kind of want to keep it like this, kind of like that relationship difference. Now I know the male in the relationship, in some cases, is dominant, but Ashe is the gang leader, she probably commands him, he has weird voice line clips, I hope I put it on screen or else I'm gonna look really weird. Is Cassidy really submissive? I don't know. I'm gonna actually move him up a little bit. I'm gonna put him there. If anyone has any reason to not have him here, please tell me, but from what I've seen, he'd be a little bit submissive and a little bit breedable. If I don't lose my sanity at the end of this, I don't know what video will. Next up is Doomfist. I'm pretty certain I can put him in dominant. Question is he breedable? Doomfist is 45. I would argue he's not really able to breed anymore. He's a little too old for that. I actually don't know what the age is, like that it's not recommended to have children anymore, but I think about there is good. Doomfist is the leader of Talon. He's pretty dominant in fights. Like, his entire life is about martial arts and beating people. So that seems pretty dominant to me. And I just don't think he's very breedable. So he's there. I won't drag it on for much longer. Next up is D.va. The first thing to mention about D.va is that she is 19. I'm so glad I'm 20 and not 30 doing this tier list. Oh my god. I would argue that she'd be on the breedable side. Now the question is she submissive? So after a little bit of research, I figured out that D.va is not the Mecha Squad leader and that instead goes to somebody else. So that means that D.va is taking orders from somebody else, which is submissive, at least according to this. Obviously, you can still be dominant and still, you know, work for other people. But because we don't have much to go off of, I'm going to put her in the submissive category. I'm not sure if it's as much as Brig, simply because she's just working somewhere while Brig is listening to Reinhardt, listening to her dad. So D.va's going to go there. And I really don't have much else to go off of. Next up is Echo. Echo's gonna go to the not breedable because she is not breedable, as she is an Omnic. Is she submissive or dominant? I think it's pretty obvious that she would be submissive to Overwatch. Is she more or less than Bastion, I think is the question, because I think I can put Baptiste a little ahead. He listens to people in Overwatch, but not to the same extent that Echo does. Echo is literally programmed by someone. I think since Echo is not very self-sufficient, I think it makes sense to put Echo at the bottom of Submissive, because she just kind of has to listen to everyone else. She can't really go off on her own, or at least she doesn't. That's the thing, she can go off on her own, she chooses not to. So to me, that's pretty submissive, even more than Bastion, which I guess makes sense. And we're not gonna linger on that, let's go to Genji! So first things first, Genji is like 35 or something, so he'd be about there. And before any of you ask, yes, he apparently does have his thing. So he is able to breed. I could have said that so much better. However, is Genji submissive or breedable? And I have gotten so many comments about Genji in particular. Some people say he's super dominant because look how he is in 0 Hour. But then some people just say, oh yeah, Genji's submissive. And I'm like, what? I don't know which one to put him as. So I, believe it or not, will put Genji a little bit into dominant simply because he left the Shamata clan, if I understand correctly, on his own. Hanzo beat him up for not listening. However, that shows that Genji is pretty dominant because he's not going to be submissive towards the Shamata clan. So I think he can actually we can say with fairly good certainty that he would be dominant. Speaking of, next up is Hanzo. Hanzo is more submissive than Genji because Hanzo listened to the Shamata clan, he followed them for longer. However, he did eventually leave, so I guess he's not too submissive. But he actually was so submissive to the Shamata clan that he actually was willing to kill his brother over it. So I don't know whether to read that as he's dominant because he dominated his brother, or as submissive because he's listening to a cult clan to do something completely wrong. I actually see it as submissive though because, like, you killed your brother, or tried to at least. So we'll put it with D.va. He's just as submissive as D.va. I think that's about accurate. If somebody skips to the end of the video and sees Hanzo in Submissive and Breedable and questions me, just like timestamp this time, please. With that being said, next up is, I think, Junker Queen. Junker Queen is the leader of Junker Town, so I would argue that she is pretty dominant. She is a dommy mommy. However, she is somewhere in her 35 to 40s, so I'm gonna put her, like, above Ashe, because I think being the leader of Junker Queen is way more impressive than being a gang leader. And she's about 35 to 40, so she'd be around Ashe's age. So I think it would accurately be fair to put her right above Ashe. Next up is the Junkrat. Junkrat is 25, so technically he is very breedable. Anyways, we now got a question, is he submissive or breedable? Because Roadhog, I think, we have to tier list with him. Roadhog is 48 years old, so I'll just preemptively put him over here. And now we got this weird scenario where they're kind of like a duo. I think Junkrat kind of decides stuff, and then when Roadhog doesn't want to do it, he'll just say no, and like, so it's this weird thing where they're both kind of submissive and dominant at the same time. And the clashing of personalities kind of makes me think that they're both just a little bit dominant, because Junkrat takes control a lot of the time, while a Roadhog will immediately snap back, and they don't fight, because Junkrat will normally bend the knee to Roadhog. So maybe he's actually submissive to Roadhog, but then Roadhog is submissive to him when Roadhog agrees with him. It's this weird scenario. I think Roadhog is just like, he just looks like the dominant one in the relationship. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. You guys can have your fan fiction in the comments, I guess, though. Next up is Kiriko. Her wiki says she's in her late 20s, so I think it's fair to put her closer to the more breedable side. We seem to be having a common trend with the breedable side. However, is she dominant or submissive? So the Hashimoto clan tried to take over Kanazaka, Kiriko fought back. Because she fought back, just like Genji, actually, I'm gonna put her next to Genji. Genji fought back against the Shimadas, Kiriko fought back against the Hashimoto, so I think they're about the same. A little bit dominant, doesn't really show too much about being submissive. There you go. Next up is the Lucio. Lucio is 26, around the same age as Kiriko, so we're just gonna put him around Kiriko's position on the breedable scale. But as always, we have to decide, is he dominant or submissive? We know that he is a freedom fighter that likes to take action, and he also is fighting against his oppressors. I'm pretty sure it's Vishkar that took over his hometown, which is the same place Symmetra works at. So him fighting back shows that he is pretty dominant. He's out there making music competitively. So I'm not sure exactly where to put him, because he's also fighting against people, so he'd be around the same place as Kiriko, but this obviously does not look very good. So I don't know which one to put on top. So I'm gonna put Lucio on top simply because he makes music. He's probably fighting on the charts for first place or whatever it's called, #1 on the chart. While Kiriko might listen to her mom sometimes. There you go. Kiriko's submissive to her mom. That's my reasoning. I'm not gonna elaborate further. You know, I said at the beginning of this video, this was a hard video to make. And at this rate, I don't even care anymore. I'm halfway through. We'll make it. Oh yeah, and right before Lucio, I would have done Lifeweaver, but we already did him. He's right there. Next up is Mei. Mei is somewhere between 31 and 40 years old, depending on which age you're calculating from. I'm gonna put it a little closer to 31, so she'd be about here. So we have to decide, as always, is she dominant or submissive? And I'll be completely real with you. I have no idea. She's submissive to Winston by listening to him all the time, as most of these characters listen to Overwatch leaders, of course. But I got a weird suggestion for you guys. I am going to suggest that she is just a little bit dominant. And why is that? Because she has a pet named Snowball, and Snowball listens to Mei. Therefore, Mei's the dominant one, and so she's a little bit dominant. Now that means if we go by that logic, that Brig would move up because she's dominant to her cat. So there you go. And I'm gonna move on before I start really thinking about if freaking Ice character is dominant or submissive. This is probably a good time to say, if you have any suggestions, you can put them down in the comments section. Just make sure to be respectful to your fellow commenters that are very submissive also. Next up is Mercy. Mercy is 37, so I'm going to put her about there. I think that's about right. But as always, we have to decide, is she dominant or submissive? And this is quite a hard one because just like Mei, we don't really have any evidence for either. However, I think if I put Mercy in submissive, I don't really think anyone's going to argue with me about that. I mean, I don't know any dominant qualities for Mercy, and when I look at Mercy, or Mercy players, I think of somebody behind a character while she's damage boosting them. So she's not really the one doing damage, and instead she's assisting, which is a little closer to submissive, so I might be going off of gameplay-wise, but I'm gonna put her in submissive. If you have a reason to not have her there, then I'll be happy to put her right in the middle, but that overlays with Mei, so I'm gonna be honest, I just wanted to do this so it looked nice and neat. Again, don't take this tier list too seriously, it's literally called a submissive and breedable tier list. Next up is Moira. Moira is 48 years old, so we'll just move Moira quite a bit over to not breedable. Now the question is she dominant or submissive? And I would have to say she's a bit more dominant, simply because she does tests on other creatures. She's not the one getting tested on, so she's not being submissive. Instead, she has complete control over them. There's this picture of her experimenting on Reaper. Reaper's pretty dominant, but Moira is the dominant one in that scenario. So I'm going to put her in dominant. I'm going to put her maybe like... Actually, I think about theirs, right? But that's a little bit better than fighting back against something, because she actually is dominating over her patient, if that's a thing. But she's not a gang leader. She's not like a full-on leader of a group. So we'll put her about there. Next up is Orisa. Orisa is an Omnic, so she's already on the not breedable side. And I would have to say that she's probably more on the submissive side since she listens to Efi. She was built by Efi, so she's listening to other people's commands. However, she is a little bit more dominant than I'd say Echo, just because she does go out of her way to like do her own thing, even if she makes mistakes. So I'm going to move Baptiste up a little bit and maybe move Anna just a little bit over. So I would say Orisa is submissive, but not breedable. Next up is Pharah. Pharah is like 32 years old, so she'd be about the same place as Mei. However, on top of her being about where Mei is, I would say that Pharah is a little higher than Mei, simply because she is the leader of the Helix group, so I would say she's about there. She is known as Captain Fariha, which I'm pretty sure is her real name. I'm gonna put her on the same level as Ashe, since they are both leaders of a group or gang, but not as high as Junkrat, because Junkrat is literally the leader of a whole entire Australian population, Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna actually put Junker Queen a little higher, kind of tied with Doomfist. Because even though Junker Queen's part of this whole entire group of people, she's not as dominant over them as Doomfist is. Because Doomfist is directly leading them, while Junker Queen's just kind of leading them, just enforcing the rules. But I'm gonna put them together just because it makes sense. Next up is Ramattra, and I'm pretty sure I can easily place this man at not breedable and dominant. He's an Omnic, so he can't really breed, but at the same time, he's dominant of Null Sector. As you can see by this picture, he literally is commanding all these ships. So, I think his placement is quite easy, quite quick. He's not breedable and dominant. Next up is Reaper. Reaper is 58 years old, so he's kind of basically where Ana is, but he's going to be a lot higher because he is a council member of Talon. He's not quite the lead of Talon because I'm pretty sure that's Doomfist. And he's not the leader of Null Sector, that's Ramattra. He's not the leader of Junker Town, that's Junker Queen. So he's a little lower, maybe like right there, that's about right. He has a lot more power than, let's say, Ashe or Pharah, but not as much as Doomfist, Junker Queen, and Ramattra. Next up is Reinhardt. Reinhardt is quite old, being 61, so he'd be about there. And I would say Reinhardt is dominant over Brigitte just because, like, she's the Squire and he's the... I'm not really sure what it'd be called. I guess the Crusader, since that's what his group was called. However, he also served under people, but he didn't listen, so in a way it's kind of like the Roadhog and Junkrat scenario, where he was submissive to the leader, but at the same time didn't really listen to them like Roadhog. But then he'd be higher than that because he also leads Brigitte, so I'm gonna say like maybe right there. I would put him maybe where Moira is. Moira's over Patience. Actually, that's about right. Moira's probably been dominant over a lot of people, while Reinhardt has been dominant over one, so I think about there is right. Next up would have been Roadhog, but he's already placed. So next up is Sigma. Now Sigma is the oldest character in Overwatch from my memory, so he's gonna go about right here. I don't think he's gonna be breeding anytime soon. However, I got some bad or good news depending on how you look at it. He is submissive, and I would honestly say he's quite submissive. He'd be really low down because he has to listen to other people. Ever since the experiment, he's been reliant on other people, so that's why I put him so far down. I would almost say he's more reliant than Echo, because Sombra's like, hey, if anyone's giving you trouble, just tell me. Because he's just not capable of doing anything since he's so mentally broken. But then, he's also able to control gravity, so that's pretty dominant of him, being able to control gravity. So I'm gonna put him, like, right here? I don't know, it's a little hard. I wouldn't be against putting him right next to Echo. It's just weird because I don't think he's shown any dominant qualities, while it shows a lot of him listening to other people, a lot of him being abused by other people, or at least implied that he gets abused by people. So we'll just leave him right where he is. Next up is Sojourn. She's around her mid-50s, so she'd be around here in the not breedable section. However, since she was second in command in Overwatch, I would say she's about right here. Sojourn is a pretty dominant person, but I don't know if she'd be as dominant since Reaper is a lot more oppressive, while Sojourn's kind of like a good leader, if you know what I mean? Not as dominant over her people. So I think Sojourn is very, very dominant, but Reaper would be a little bit more dominant. Next up is Soldier 76. He's around 40 to 50, somewhere around there. I'll just say early 50s, so about here. And he's pretty dominant. I'd say he's about here. He dominates over people since he was the leader of Overwatch for a while, and he still just does his own thing. He doesn't listen to anyone. So yeah, Soldier is just dominant. I don't really have much else to say. It kind of just is, he was the leader of Overwatch, he's dominant. He does his own thing, doesn't listen to people, he's dominant. Which may raise the question that Ana should probably be higher, but I can't remember why I put her there. I took a nap. This is two different me's working on this video now. Next up is Sombra. Sombra's 32 years old, so I'd put her over here, but I would put her above everyone else here. If you've ever seen Sombra's origin story or the infiltration short, you'll know that she dominates other people by getting blackmail on them or hacking it into their system. So although she listens to Doomfist and Reaper, she's actually kind of manipulating them in a way, because she arguably has more power than them. As she has the blackmail, she has all the information, while they just can punch stuff or shoot stuff. In a way, you could say that Sombra could be higher simply because she may have blackmail over everyone else here, but since we don't know that, I'm gonna just put her down here, because we know she has blackmail on at least some people of power, like the leader of Russia, for example. That's pretty dominant, but Doomfist also has, like, power over Null Sector because he's friends with Ramattra. It's probably vice versa. So we're not really sure who is more powerful, so I'm just gonna put Sombra down here since she's not directly in control of everyone yet. However, for all we know, she could be indirectly in control of everyone and could be the most dominant. Next up is Symmetra. Symmetra is 28 years old, so I'll just put her in breedable. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but age doesn't equal breedability. As you will see in a little bit, I just have been doing that for most of the characters, but that won't be true for all of them, just trust me. We're almost there. Actually, he's the next one. But Symmetra is a little bit of a hard one because the corporation she works at is dominant over, I think, the people of Brazil, if I remember, while she is not in control of that organization. She also goes out of her way to do her own research, so I'm not really sure if she's dominant because she's doing stuff, or if she is submissive to the company. It's kind of like a little bit of Hanzo, but then a little bit of, you know, being dominant. So I'm gonna actually put her into submissive just because she's still working for an oppressive company. Although I know she has made efforts to make it better, or at least do research, I don't really remember, I'm gonna be honest with you. But she's still working there nonetheless, and just being submissive to that company, that's just terrible. And now for one that makes me excited, Torbjorn. He is very dominant and very breedable, because he has a lot of children, and he's dominant. I'm not going to explain why he's dominant, but just trust me, he is. He is very, very dominant and breedable. No further questions. Come on, we all know Torbjorn is dominant and breedable. Anyways, moving on to Tracer. So as Tracer, kind of like with Lifeweaver and Baptiste being over here, I think I was putting people who likely would not breed over here. But now that I'm looking back, I don't really think that's a good idea. However, we're going to commit to it. Tracer's probably not going to be breeding anytime soon, as she is a lesbian. So we have to question, is she dominant or is she submissive? I would say actually where I put her right here is kind of good, because she is submissive to Overwatch, but at the same time she takes so much initiative that I would say she's at least a little bit dominant. Maybe not as much as Reinhardt, because Reinhardt is directly in control over Brigitte, but Tracer is just a little bit dominant, so I think about right there is good. Next up is Widowmaker. Widowmaker is one of those that people were arguing over. Widowmaker is submissive as she was kidnapped, turned into an assassin, brainwashed, you know, all that stuff, so she's submissive to Talon. But she's also dominant because she's, you know, big sniper lady, she's just dominant. You just can kind of look at her and see her actions and see how she's dominating other people. However, like I said, she's submissive to Talon, listening to them all the time, and so it's a little hard to tell whether she's dominant or not, and people were arguing over it, and I'm not sure. So I'm gonna put her about here on the dominant scale because she's not like fighting back, she's still submissive to Talon. So I wouldn't say she's as high. She's not the leader of Talon, she's not fighting back from Talon, so she's submissive to Talon. But it's so hard to say that she's actually submissive because she still has such a dominant personality. Also, she's 33 years old, so I'm going to put her right next to May. Next up is Winston. From previous research, I have learned that Winston would probably not be very breedable as he is quite an old feller for being a gorilla, while gorillas don't have babies very often, only like between 4 to 6 years. How I know this fact, I do not know. So the question is he dominant or submissive? He was submissive on Horizon Lunar Colony, but I would say he's a little bit more dominant now because he has control over Athena. He escaped, technically, so he got away from all the gorillas that were making a mess. He wasn't submissive to them. However, he also wasn't submissive to the astronauts or scientists up there. So he's kind of dominant. He's kind of like Genji, where he just kind of ran away. So I think about here would be okay. I mean, I'm gonna try and fit him right between Roadhog and Reinhardt. Right there. He has a little bit of a dominant personality, but I don't think he's ever gonna have a child, so not breedable, but a little bit dominant. Next up is the hamster. Hammond would be quite breedable because hamsters have a lot of children, so his breedability is quite high. However, is he dominant or submissive? So he's submissive to Junkrat Queen as he is her bodyguard. However, he dominates in the ring. He doesn't let other people win. he just destroys them. So, it's another weird scenario where he's a little bit submissive and a little bit dominant, but he's in such power. He's literally like second in command to Junkrat Queen. So I think it makes sense to put Hammond here. He's second in command of Junkrat Town, and he beats all the gladiators in the gladiator ring. He feels like a pretty dominant person, even if he is listening under someone. That just means he's not in the very, very top tier. Next up is Zarya. Believe it or not, Zarya is 28 years old, so she'd go about there. But the question is, always, is she breedable or submissive? So Zarya is simply a soldier of Russia, so she is submissive to the generals, to the leader of Russia. However, she is literally the strongest person on Earth in the Overwatch lore, so I don't know if she's actually submissive or not. So after further review, I actually have looked up some of Zarya's lore, and she actually is seen leading soldiers also. So actually, I would say she goes about where Pharah is, because she's leading soldiers. Now this doesn't look very neat, so let me just reorganize it real quick. So we'll move Lucio a little over, and I think about right there is good for Zarya. And finally, we have the boy, Zenyatta. We all know that Zenyatta is basically Robo-Jesus. So let's think about something real quick. Jesus was born just out of nowhere, right? Like, if I remember correctly, Mary, the person who birthed Jesus, was very old or something, or just wouldn't have children. So that means that age doesn't matter when you're Jesus. So you can be breedable all you want. So I think by that logic, he is very breedable, although he isn't Omnic. Remember, he's Robo-Jesus, so he can have children whenever he wants, no matter what. The question is he dominant or submissive? Well, since Mary didn't do the thing that leads to a pregnancy, that means that she was never submissive. However, Mary also was never dominant, so what I'm hearing is that Zenyatta is dominant and submissive and breedable at the same time. So, I'll just help us out here. And there we go. Zenyatta is breedable, dominant, and submissive. And if you're not happy with that, because he isn't Omnic, we'll just say he's not breedable also. Anyways, I got work in like 30 minutes, so I gotta go. Anyways, I hope you guys liked and enjoyed, and you guys get a nice sleep, because I sure didn't. I got like 4 hours of sleep. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy, like, and subscribe. I already said that. Goodbye. Where is it?
This
The
one.
Mokra,
That's
that one, he's flying
Bulbasaur!
away.